Welcome to the Business of Family, the podcast where we explore the stories, challenges, and opportunities of family businesses. I'm your host, Tammy Buss, and I'm a family business survivor, and I'm also a family business advisor. In this show, we'll be talking with family business leaders and experts to bring you insights and inspiration so you too can survive your family business journey. Whether you're a founder, a successor, a professional, or just curious about family business, this podcast is for you. So today on our show, we have Wendy McIntyre. She's a senior consultant and founder of Resolve HR, a human resources consulting company. Resolve HR is a family business that delivers tailored solutions to organizations in the areas of workforce planning, workplace reviews and investigations, conflict resolutions, and training and development. A chartered professional in human resources, Wendy has been serving clients for over 20 years. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
So I love, I got to get into this investigation part, but let's start with, I always find this interesting, what people do and how they do their role. And so let's start sort of at the beginning because this is a podcast for family businesses. So tell me a little bit about your journey and how you actually became a family business.
The family business piece is pretty new for me, but I started the business in 2015 on my own and have had different people with me as employees or as service contractors. And they tended to be sort of short term. And my husband was working with the provincial government and health and managing lots of people quite often. So he kind of decided that it was time for him to leave government. He was a bit burned out having worked in health. And in May, he joined me, and it has
Oh.
been fantastic. It has been
Mhm.
just a real game changer personally and for the business.
Yeah, that's great. You like to hear those wonderful stories about how families start working together because really and truly in first generation family businesses, a lot of times the business is started by one person and then family starts to, come into the business and it evolves and then transition and succession. But today I want to talk about, your involvement in working with family businesses. So tell me a little bit about the process or what happens when there's a complaint about a family member who's currently working in the business, because you get that a lot, right? Where you've got family members and it's not the same as a complaint against a stranger, right?
Right.
This is now you're complaining about a family member working in the business, whether it's just an employee complaining or it's another family member complaining. So tell me a little bit about what you even do. How do you even approach this?
And so often you don't know anything about it because nobody will say anything.
I know.
Uh, so before I went out on my own years ago, I worked for a family business. And I also, now when I consult with businesses and they say, if they're not a family business, they say, we're like a family. And I think,
No,
no.
you're not.
And quite often, because of experience I've had in the past with a family business, I think you don't want to be because there are so many challenges. And whether it's being seen within the family or by externals that are working with the family, it's really can be challenging.
Mm,
Um, so when I work with family businesses that are actually family businesses, I really try to say there is responsibilities and rights that employers have. And when it comes to things like workplace investigations for harassment or bullying, there is legislation that you have to comply with. So
right.
making people aware of what is harassment, what is bullying, what does the employer need to do, and and how can employees also deal with that because they have an obligation to report it as well.
Mhm.
And in those situations, I know that my role as a consultant is to come in and tell the truth when it's
Right.
sometimes difficult. And I can be that more of a hardliner to say, okay, this is the situation, here's the complaint, here's what we need to do. And
Mm,
I can be that outside person where you may not be able to say to your child that's in the business, well, you're bullying employees.
mhm.
I can come in and help them do that.
How does it get to you though? Because I'm sure with a lot of family businesses, they go through this that, there is someone who's bullying or someone who's not pulling their weight or something that's going on that's a complaint and they don't say anything. So it just goes on and on and on, or people just leave, right? So, and you
Yeah.
don't really know why they've left. So how do you, you know, bring that out into the open and how do they get to you really? Because do they come to you after it's the fire's already burning or, or, how do you get there when there's just a little bit of smoke?
Yeah. So I'm located in PEI, but this is the case for most provinces. There is legislation about harassment and bullying in the workplace, and part of that is that um, OH&S officers are going around to different businesses when they don't have a board or when they're owner-operated businesses to say you need to have your policy on harassment and bullying, and you have to identify an external party for your employees to complain to.
Okay.
So some of it is coming through that because people feel that they can be anonymous when they make complaints. Um, there's a whole other component to that I could explain, but I'll stick on the track here because the other side of it is that employers will see their best employees leaving.
Hmm.
And sometimes they'll hire us to say, we don't know what's going on. Why are people leaving? Like, we've lost our best, this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
And then I can go in and say, let's do a review, not an investigation, but let's do a review on what's happening. And then I can draw out the information from employees and find out and then position it in such a way that I can explain it to the employer without them taking it so personally. Because I
Mm.
often say, your business, even though it's yours, and I've had to learn this, but your business is its own entity. It's not you. It's not a
Hmm.
baby. It feels like it is
Yeah.
because you live and breathe it, but it
Right.
is its own
It's our
entity. So,
firstborn in a lot of cases, right?
right? So, how do you protect that without taking it personally? And that
Hmm.
can mean, and then, if it's that it's a family member that's being complained about, maybe I can come in and also help that person with seeing other avenues that they could pursue or some training they could take, or I can give them some management advice and coaching one-off to help them through that.
Hmm. And so you recommend that this information is posted like in the lunchroom or somewhere where they can see that here's a number to call or here's an external person to call if you feel that there's an issue.
Yeah, it feels really icky because
Hmm.
who wants to open that Pandora's box?
Yeah. And I know
Yeah.
that because we're here in Canada and we have a lot of listeners in the States, I'm sure that there is, the same type of legislation in the US in different states. But I know here in our own office that, we had all these papers from the government stuck on a wall. Like, here's the, emergency exit. Here's the health. Like, it's like so many things that kind of becomes a little overwhelming when you
And you
see all
ignore
these.
it.
You just ignore it because it's there. Like I remember we having to have training if someone came in and there was a problem, a threat of some sort. Like we all had to practice like Mr. Brown is in the building or whatever.
Okay.
So if you're not told to do this, you're not going to read those documents, right? So
Absolutely.
and having a complaint about a family member is a very delicate situation for everybody, right? Particularly if you're a smaller business that you'd rather just leave than upset the apple cart, right?
Absolutely. You don't feel like anybody's going to listen to you anyway. Or a lot of
Mm.
times, what I find employees will say, well, I've told them before, I've told them. And sometimes I'll say, how did you tell them?
Right.
Did you mention it in passing in the hall? Did you grumble about something? Like, did you
Hmm.
write it down? Did you say, I need to meet with you about this topic? Because you might think that you say it to them all the time and they just aren't listening, but they actually aren't hearing your subtlety um,
Yes,
because you're finding it so sensitive and you don't want to rock the boat. But if it's that important to you that you're saying something to me, then it's important for them to know because they need to work with
absolutely.
their business.
And it's communication. I mean, it all comes down to being
Always.
able to communicate and being felt heard and comfortable that you will be heard if you do bring something up, that it's not
Yeah.
just complaining. So how do you prepare? Like, how would someone prepare to have a complaint? Like, if they, like, what would they do to say, okay, here's the process you need to have, not just whining about something, but because there's a difference, right? You have some people who just
Oh
complain
yeah.
about everything, and then you have legitimate ones, right? And so if someone's complaining all the time and something isn't done, then you feel, well, what's the why should I even bother, because nothing's ever done. So how can you prepare both your employees to complain, to be, it's okay, we need to know that, but also to the employees, here's what you need to do if you want to have your complaint heard.
hmm So it really comes back to one of the fundamental pieces is that you do have that policy and that you educate your employees on the policy, which includes who the contact is, how to make it a complaint. And while a business, an employer doesn't need to have a written complaint submitted for them to be required to investigate, it is wonderful when it does happen. So you really want to encourage your employees. You want to have a form that they can fill out to make it super easy for them and for them to know that there is such a thing that is the employer wanting to know.
Hmm.
And then, and one of the things when legislation started to come out about bullying in the workplace, not just sexual harassment, but general harassment, then there was also a requirement for employers to train their staff. And I think that training them, giving them a workshop on what it is every couple of years as a refresher is so important. I do find that since the pandemic, people have gotten kind of nasty.
Yeah.
Um,
Little
so,
entitled in some cases, I think.
right? So helping employees know what harassment is and is not is
Hmm.
so important. And that can eliminate a lot of frivolous complaints. Now, if somebody comes to you, an employee, and says, this is driving me crazy, this is a problem with that, or they pushed me, or they said these things to me, but don't do anything. I just needed to vent. There, I'm
Mm.
better.
Yeah.
People are actually doing is they're embedding it deeper into their minds, and it gets worse. So anytime somebody does that, they just say, I just need a vent. You say,
Mm.
if it's important enough to tell me,
Yeah.
what are we going to do about this? I can't just drop it at that. We have to look into it.
So
Um,
when you have larger companies, they have HR departments. And so
mhm.
there's HR, human resources consulting companies like yours who are there for the smaller companies. I don't know if you
Yeah.
work with larger companies as well, but do
Yep.
you tend to work with companies who don't have an HR department? Is that like a
That's,
fractional work, or like how would you how, how would you even, promote yourself to a family business? Like, how do you say, here's what I can do for you? We all understand HR consulting, but and a lot of times we don't think we need an HR person. We can handle
oh,
it ourselves, right? Because I
and it's
mean, we can do
embarrassing,
everything. Yeah.
right? And it's embarrassing because
Hmm.
people might be coming to air their dirty laundry with me. So how I typically we offer fractional HR work. So you just need some, but you need the expertise, but you don't want to have a full-time staff person or
Hmm.
department. We offer that, but we also offer those messy ambulance services because you hopefully don't need those all the time. It is good if you need them now and again because it shows that you're kind of pushing the envelope, but you're not going overboard, hopefully. But that's where innovation happens too.
Right.
Um, so we do that messy stuff, and we also do the training. And it's so important to get that training and, what are supervisor and management rights and responsibilities? How do you performance manage people? What does an investigation look like or a review? What does it look like for the personalities? What are our personalities? How should we communicate with one another? There's all those pieces that can professionalize what a family business does and gets everybody on the same page. So there's less favoritism, hopefully, or perceived favoritism,
Hmm.
and people can figure out this is a business. It's not just a family. I'm not just getting up in their business. This is an actual business.
Because, having said that, not getting up in their business, that's an issue with family businesses because a lot of families don't want other people to know their dirty laundry. And they don't want to bring outsiders in to help. But you need outside talent to actually grow the business and to expand it. So if someone doesn't have an HR department, like what is the process to say, what could you do for me? Because a lot of times, with our clients, they don't know what they don't know, right? And
Yeah.
somebody mentions something and then they go, oh, I didn't realize that. And then you go looking at it. So if we're talking to companies who don't have full HR departments, what is your recommendation on, what to do and, how would I know what I needed really?
Yeah, so one of the things that we try to do is a bit of an HR audit with clients when we start out. But what I would give for general recommendation is to look at, do you have employment agreements? Do you have the right insurance for your staff? Do you have policies? Do you have an employee handbook, an employee policy manual? Do people know the org chart to know who to go to, who they report to? Do they have job descriptions? These are the basic fundamental pieces that you need, and they can help mitigate some risks. I worked in some law firms before I went out on my own, so I do pay special attention to risks. So
Risk, yeah.
how do you hire appropriately without having a human rights complaint come in? Like,
Hmm.
we'll walk you through that. How do you terminate or discipline somebody when, again, human rights is the scary one, I think. I
Yes.
often say, because it's the most gray and it's the most overarching. But then you're looking at employment legislation. What about common law? Like, what are the precedents there for severance? What are all those pieces? So some of it is not to scare employers, but a little fear is healthy so that it
Yes.
keeps you on your toes.
Hmm.
So really, yeah, the employment agreements, the employee policies, um, looking at how you hire, fire, discipline people, those are some of the core pieces
Hmm.
that employers really need to be looking at and making sure they have their house in order.
So again, you don't really think you need HR on a daily basis. So how do you engage someone to say, look, and I need to have someone sort of, on speed dial when there's an issue. So again, you want to go in prior to the fire starting, right? So,
Absolutely.
preventative and, being proactive rather than reactive in a lot of
Yeah.
situations. So how does that work in terms of, have a conversation with someone, say, okay, we do an audit, we've done an audit, and yeah, you don't need monthly. What you need is when you hire, when you fire,
Yeah.
we're going to review your policies. We're going to train. Like, how does that work? Is it like a yearly thing? How should you,
Yeah.
look to an HR consulting company to help?
Yeah. As you mentioned, usually we find out when things are in chaos or crisis mode
Yeah,
and my
me too.
husband, yeah, right?
That's what families call me when they're in crisis mode. I want to
Right?
do the preventative stuff, not the,
Yeah.
but that's just the nature of the beast, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't know you need help until you need help, and then you sort of try to stop, put all the horses back in the barn kind of thing. But anyway,
And
sorry to
my
interrupt.
Yeah, no, my husband and my partner, what he says is, well, pay me now or pay me later.
Hmm.
And when you're paying for prevention, it seems like a waste. I think we all human,
Yeah,
we don't know what we don't know. But then we know when there's crisis and then it's at a premium and your time and your heart is in
absolutely.
crisis.
Well, we all have other places to spend our money, right? Like,
Oh my
it's
gosh,
like,
do we ever?
I don't want to spend this on something I don't even have a problem with. But that's the
Right?
point of making sure it continues to be no problem. Because I think as you grow, it gets a little more complicated. And I remember one of my clients that I worked with for over 30 years, they actually sold the company, so I no longer work with them, the family. But I work with the family in different capacity, not in the business side. But when they started, there was like 10 employees, and at their exit, there was 300.
Oh wow.
And they knew everybody for many, many years. They knew everybody who worked there. They knew every situation. They knew your kids' names, they knew everything. But as it started to grow, they got more disconnected. And when you have more people, there's more dynamics. And all of a sudden now you actually need to have policies and procedures that you never had before. because you didn't think you needed them. You're this great family business. And again, you're at a crisis and you're like, well, we need to put these policies in place now because this happened, and because you
Yeah,
just get that a little bit further away from them. And I'm not saying it has to be 300 people or 3,000, but even when you're 30 people,
it's
it
scaling.
becomes it's the scaling that causes the problem. And again, if you've never had to deal with it before, you don't realize that you need it. And that's what
Yeah,
I'm hoping this podcast will reach out to families to say, you know what, if you are a family business, you don't have an HR department, maybe you should call somebody in
yeah,
and just like you
yeah.
say, have an audit to
Because
find out what's going on and what you need to protect yourself from moving forward.
yeah, because chances are, I mean, I've been 20 plus years in HR. I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
Not much will surprise me. I've seen, questionable pictures. I've seen and heard a lot. So, and if it's happening in your business, I'm not going to judge you. I think anybody who can make their own business, I mean, it's not for the faint of heart.
No.
So anybody who's doing that, and if they engage me, I think kudos to them because
Mm,
I can see they're trying, and I
yeah.
admire that.
Good.
So typically with what I do, a lot of it is word of mouth. How people find out because I'm a trusted, people trust me, and people
Mm,
who I connect with, they know me and they know my style and they know how I work. So we have that relationship. Now for me personally, I'm trying to get beyond PEI because we're pretty small place.
mm.
And I know
Beautiful and
there's,
but small.
oh, I love it here. I was the fourth generation growing up in on the homestead on a farm.
Oh, amazing,
So yeah,
amazing.
I
And
guess
for
another little family business.
yeah, and for listeners, again, that's the home of Anna Green Gables. So a lot of
It is
tourists go to PEI to see Anna Green Gables and the red sand and or
beautiful
soil and stuff. It's
beaches.
beautiful. But anyway,
That's
I
true.
digress. Come to Canada. Here's the ad. Come to Canada.
That's
See all our
right.
areas, and PEI is one of them. It's beautiful. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So keep going. So expanding
Oh,
outside of the
yeah.
province.
Expanding outside of the province and I'm trying to scale like so many people are. So we're getting associates across the country. But really for somebody to come to look for an HR consultant like me, I have a style. I I believe in what I do and I love to get to know the business and then we can really partner together on things. And I think it's important if you want somebody who's more of a consultant that's, you know, um, really black and white, driving things, being fast, you know, will do it fast and do it hard. That is a different kind of consultant, whereas
Right.
I'm more about how do we make sure that everybody's safe and we're protecting things and dealing with risk as it comes. So I think for a family business to determine who they want as their HR consultant is really important too.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's so, and I'm also a diverse, as I know Blue Roots is, a woman-owned business enterprise.
Hmm.
So there's the diverse supply chain things there for ESG with companies. So there's all kinds of things
Right.
that you look at for your values, especially when it's a family business.
Right. And again, not to knock our male listeners by any means, but I think women business owners come at situations a little bit different because we really are nurturers by nature. Not everybody. Again, I'm not, trying to paint everybody with the
Yeah,
same
no.
brush, but we do come at it from a different perspective. That's really about that nurturing and caring. And then our experience, like yours in the law firm, okay, my experience, but I'm going to sort of mitigate risk if that's what I'm going to do. Mine is I want to keep family businesses in the family because I spent, 30 plus years building a business and I really wanted it to continue and not be sold after all those years of hard work. So we sort of come at it from a different angle. And
Hmm.
again, not all family business advisors come at it from that side either. So you're
No.
right in that you have to find the right fit for you,
Yeah.
regardless of the industry or the talent that you're bringing in, um, or the other outside advisors, is to make sure they align with your values. And we really are strong on values, mission, and vision to make sure that we understand you and what you're trying to accomplish, and how do we help you get there. Just like
Beautiful.
it's sounding like what you do as a HR consulting company.
That's what I strive for. Hmm. Yeah,
That's great. So we are just about at the end of time. It goes very fast, doesn't it?
it
But I
does.
want to I always end with wanting you to give me sort of your three top tips or advice that you would give to a family business on implementing HR or, talking to a consultant or HR policy. So give me sort of three top tips from your industry to families of, family businesses.
One would be put as much structure in as possible so that I know that people like to be fluid and use judgment, but sometimes you want a policy to say, this is what we have to do because the policy says so. And it takes out that personal sensitivity, I think. So that would be one of my recommendations. Another would be when you're talking to an HR consultant to be really honest as much as you can. Sometimes it's hard to articulate what you want to have out of that relationship because you don't know what you don't know. But to be honest about what your goal is, what you're worried about, what keeps you up at night, that age-old question, and then to find out, do you understand what I'm saying? To really make sure that you're aligned. And a third piece of advice, I think, was what was mentioned previously about know your have an external party for those complaints. To have somebody that your employees can go to, but that you also have a good understanding of what they're going to do with your employees, because there can be concern for an employer to say, well, if my employees just call you and complain all the time, are you charging me for all that?
Mm,
Because there's also, well, we can't tell you everything we're told, but I don't want to run up your bill astronomically because people want to find out about this, that, and the other thing.
hmm.
Um, so it is to have something that's pretty clear about how it's going to work, what's going to be done, what you find out, how it's charged, those kinds of things.
That's
Yeah.
great. Well, one of the things I want to mention is about policies, because sometimes policies you're policied out, like you just have so many policies. But I tell you, I was with a bunch of women last night, part of the Women's Presidents Organization. I'm not gonna say who or the firm or whatever, but there was a junior or uh, a student, sort of junior, who was learning from a tenured person, and they were showing up to a client meeting. So that this junior was to sit and observe, like not to actually do anything, but to observe watching this particular person do their work. And they showed up in a hoodie, and she was mortified, and she said, like, I didn't think I had to have a policy around business wear or what to wear in this environment. But
Yeah.
again, if you're not super huge, you don't think of having that policy that says, okay, this is how you must dress. This is what you can wear. And you think, wow, I'm surprised you have to tell somebody that if they're going to observe in this particular situation to clients, that you would dress in a more business fashion as opposed to a hoodie.
Mm,
But I
mm.
said, this is why there are so many rules and regulations with large companies that say, you can't wear blue eyeshadows on Tuesdays because somebody did something. And you're like,
Right.
they weren't thinking. And now we have to have a policy around that. So,
And
sometimes it's having the policy before it happens. Simple ones like, a dress code, which I
and
was I
those
was like,
make me
wow.
Yeah, and those make me so nervous because when I look at, I don't like to do employee policies that are more than 20, 25 pages because people will stop reading it
Oh,
and they won't go to it for anything. That's
no.
why I also like it in a document where you just go Control F and find what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I see a lot of policies, I think, ooh, they've been burned before and now everybody's getting a
Absolutely.
blanket statement.
Absolutely. And that's really unfortunate for everybody
Yeah,
because it really impacts absolutely everyone. And
it
okay,
does.
so define, and even when you define, and I'm sorry, I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but
I'm with you.
um, Yeah. There's like measuring skirts, there's the width of the straps. I mean, there's like no
Right.
open toes. It's like what is appropriate to your business? And you would think that you wouldn't have to do that. And there's the difference between, having a salesperson or having a professional versus an administration. And so
Yes.
now you have to make it blanket for everybody. And I think
You
that becomes
do
a
and you
bit of an
don't.
issue.
You do and you don't, because that's where I do a lot of training on being a supervisor or manager is talk to that person.
Hmm.
Because so often when you do a blanket statement, the person who you're meaning to give the message to thinks, oh, I wonder who did that, or I wonder
Yeah,
what's going on there.
that's so
And
true. That's so true.
everybody else is thinking, that was Tammy.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I
yeah.
can't
Or
believe.
deodorant.
Yes,
So perfumes, deodorant. Oh my God, we can go down a rabbit. You know what,
so
Wendy? We'll have to
much.
have you back, and we'll have to
Love
talk about
to.
all these issues that you need to think about when you're writing your manuals. Because if you don't have one, it's a good thing to look at a sample one or talk to
Oh
somebody
yeah.
else. Particularly if you're in business, other business owners say, "Hey, what have you got? Do you mind if I take a look? Like, is
Yes.
there things you wish you'd have changed or whatever?" But anyway, I think policies and procedures are. I can't speak policies and procedures are one of the top things that I think we forget as HR policies and procedures that we forget as
They're
a
a
small
tool.
company. Yeah, it's
They're a
one of the
tool
tools.
for you to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for coming in and being a part of this today. So I appreciate your time. And where can they reach you if listeners want to
So,
find you? Where are you?
yeah, my business is Resolve HR and it's resolvehr.ca. My email address is Wendy, Wendy, at resolvehr.ca.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from people. And we're on LinkedIn as well. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
If you like this episode, subscribe to the Business of Family podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can also find Blue Roots on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. On the next show, I'll be back with another amazing guest who will inspire you with their family business insights. Until then, take care and keep it in the family. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, tax, investment, or insurance advice. Before acting on any advice, please contact your personal or company advisors.